This week, SpaceX set a new booster reusability record with a rapid series of Starlink launches. China pushes forward with multiple missions as it expands its LEO constellation, and Starship takes another step towards becoming operational at scale. My name is Connor, and welcome to another amazing episode of Spaceflight News. Blue Origin is now seeking certification of its New Glenn rocket for the United States national security missions. According to Space Force leadership, Blue Origin and the government agreed on 4 launch benchmarks to qualify New Glenn. The rocket has completed 2 launches so far, with the next flight expected early next year. The number of flights required for certification varies depending on factors like vehicle maturity, test history, and acceptable risk. If successful, Blue Origin would become the 3rd heavy lift launch provider certified for national security missions, alongside SpaceX and United Launch Alliance. This would be a significant milestone for Blue Origin, moving it from development into direct competition in the most critical launch market in the entire world. SpaceX has officially received approval from the United States Department of the Air Force to build Starship Launch Complex at Cape Canaveral. The plan is to convert Space Launch Complex 37, previously used by the United States Launch Alliance Delta IV rocket, and they're turning it into a Starship facility with 2 launch pads, capable of supporting up to 76 launches per year. This approval came after a full environmental review, which found no significant long-term impacts from Starship launches or their landings, aside from the noise. While Starship will be loud, extremely loud, the report concluded that noise impacts outside of the boundaries of Cape Canaveral would be limited enough for the program to go through. This is a major step forward for SpaceX. It means Starship is no longer just a Texas-based experimental system, but something the United States military and government are now formally integrating into the core launch infrastructure of the entire country. According to sources familiar with the company's plans, SpaceX is preparing for an initial public offering as early as the second half of 2026. The IPO could raise well over $30 billion, potentially valuing SpaceX at around $1.5 trillion, a valuation that would place it among the most valuable companies in existence. SpaceX has discussed the idea of going public before, including a possible Starlink spin-off as far back as 2020, but they repeatedly delayed those plans for various reasons. This time, however, the move appears a bit more concrete. At least part of the funding raised would reportedly go towards developing orbital data centers, suggesting SpaceX is thinking well beyond launch services and communications and moving towards large-scale, space-based infrastructure. A new study from the US National Academies said that the search for past or present life on Mars should be the top scientific priority for future human missions to the Red Planet. The report identified 11 key science goals, selected from hundreds of possibilities. These range from life detection to studying Martian resources to understand how the environment affects human health and other organisms. It also outlined 4 possible mission campaigns, involving combinations of short and long-duration surface stays. Importantly, the study focused on what humans should do on Mars, not how they should get there. Questions of transportation, cost, and timelines were deliberately left out for later analysis. The message is very clear. When humans go to Mars, science, especially life detection, should lead the mission. NASA's Astrophysics Division may be getting a reprieve after facing proposed budget cuts of nearly 2/3 in the administration's 2026 request. Officials now say they're planning around funding levels outlined in House's spending bill, which largely rejected the cuts of the administration. While slightly lower than the Senate proposal, the funding would allow major missions to move forward. This includes selecting a new probe-class astrophysics mission next year and launching the Roman Space Telescope as soon as next fall, as well as flying several smaller missions in the coming months. NASA is also working to reboost the aging Swift Observatory, and if this funding holds, it would stabilize one of NASA's most scientifically productive programs after months of uncertainty. At Starbase, SpaceX continues pushing hard on Starship infrastructure. Cryogenic testing is ongoing at the tank farm, including work on methane storage systems that were rebuilt after earlier damage. These tests are quiet but critical, as they are a step towards supporting higher launch cadence and more reliable ground operations. Construction at the Gigabay is accelerating, with major structural beams going up and cranes preparing to extend even higher. This points to SpaceX getting closer to handling large starships and super heavy stacks indoors, which speeds up assembly and protects vehicles from the weather. We also saw landing hardware moving around the site, including large tanks associated with Super Heavy booster, which are being transported into their correct positions. These components are essential for future catch and recovery operations, reinforcing that SpaceX is still refining rapid reuse systems, not just launch capability. At the launch pad, demolition and rebuilding continues. Old structures tied to earlier designs are being removed, while new foundations, plumbing, and mechanical systems are installed. This includes upgrades tied to water deluge systems and heavy-duty compressors, which are needed to support full-scale Starship launches. Overall, the key takeaway is simple. Starbase is shifting from experimental testing towards long-term, high-rate operations. Less spectacle, more infrastructure. And that's exactly what you want to see at this stage of development. SpaceX had another extremely busy week with Starlink launches. On December 8, Falcon 9 lifted off from Kennedy Space Center, carrying 29 satellites from Starlink Group 6-92. The highlight was the booster, which completed its 32nd flight and landing, a new reusability record. That pace continued on December 10, with Starlink Group 15 and 11 launching from Vandenberg, deploying 27 satellites, followed by Starlink Group 690 on December 11 from Cape Canaveral, which was placing 29 more satellites into orbit. This week wrapped up on December 14th with a final Falcon 9 launch from Vandenberg, carrying 27 satellites for Starlink 1512. China also had a rapid stretch of launches this week. A Long March 4B launched the Yaogan 47 remote sensing satellite, followed by a Long March 3BE carrying the classified TJSW-22 communications payload. China continued expanding its low Earth orbit internet constellation with 2 more launches, a Long March 6A carrying SatNet LEO Group 15, and a Long March 12 launching SatNet LEO Group 16. We also saw CAS Space's Kinetica 1 rocket launch 9 satellites, drawing attention for a reported close orbital approach. And we saw the Kaohsiao 11 rocket, which launched the Deer 5 experimental spacecraft from Jiuquan. And that's it for this week in spaceflight. If you want to stay up to date on launches, Starship development, and the future of space exploration, make sure you're subscribed. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.